Hi, this is Margarit Brigham coming to you with a bit of a storytelling time about trumpeter swans. It's a very difficult story for me to tell right now, but I'm going to come from a place of healing, not the wounds, and how important my Patreons have been to me. So with them, I was able to create a 2019 calendar, and recently just did 2020 Trumpeter Swan Calendar. This is in the form of storybook. And what's the story? Story is that they are native to Ontario and they were almost extinct. So between the 1880s and early 1980, it's like a century, there was none to be found. And it was one man, Harry Lunson, who brought them back. He got eggs from Alaska, and that was in 1982. So this is all the story in this calendar. Now, about 200 of them go to Lake Ontario, Burlington, for their winter home. So that's what this calendar was last year. $5 from each calendar went to the Trumpeter Swan Coalition to help fight their home, because there is a marina that want to build a break wall to protect their boats, but that could have froze the water. And that's just where they are a wild bird, and that's where they chose to be. So we won that battle, and that was part of their extinction. It was loss of habitat, or almost extinction. The important people I want to share with you are Mr. and Mrs. Soul. So in the 2019 calendar, this swan, the front cover, is their swan. And this one here is Jacob. Now he's about 20. And where I was living for the past 3.5 years, in the small town of Erin, there were swans living there. Well, I used to live in a town of Orangeville, and that's where my doctor was. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Soul were volunteer drivers, and they took me to the doctor's one time. Obviously, I didn't have a car. Part of my story is very sad, and I will share about that in a moment. And as we were driving out, they said to me, "Do you see these swans here?" And I said, "Yeah, I love these swans." They said, "They come from our pond, from our swans." So they have been volunteers for 25 years to help repopulate this beautiful, majestic bird. They have since retired. So, yes, the swans really had saved my life. When I met Harry Lunson last year, which was Family Day down at Lake Ontario, I gave him this calendar, and I said to him, "You are my hero. Thank you for bringing these birds back. They saved my life." And he said, "I've heard that from other people." So how did they save my life? Well, it was just like a 5-minute walk and I could be at the ponds. And almost every day I went for a walk and communed with them, took photos and videos, shared them on Facebook. But it was my time of healing. And so, my past life, I was a yoga teacher, but what was happening was I was like the ugly duckling. If you know that story by Hans Christian Andersen, he's born in a duck yard and gets bounced around and almost dead. And that was me. And my doctor was, you can't work right now. So I had to apply for disability. So what I didn't know, and what a lot of people don't know, is before you can even get disability, you have to go on welfare, which is like $700 a month. So I was getting that, and then it dropped down to $667. So if minimum wage is $14 an hour here, so you can people can survive the cost of living. How are you supposed to survive on $700 a month when your rent is like $500? So of course there's food bank and everything else. So it had been a good year or so. I was at one point, trying to build up my business in a new town after moving like 11 times. And so I applied for disability. That was in August of 2018, and I was denied. They do this little thing about denying you. So that was in November I was denied. Well, I met Mr. and Mrs. Soul in October, and my bank card had just been compromised. Someone went on a shopping spree, and I'm like, really? Like, I was just at the food bank, and someone went to Adidas and buying all these material things, and I'm just like on the brink of despair. So a friend said, well, why don't you do a calendar to help raise money? And when I met Mr. and Mrs. Soul, Jim and Norma, and I was telling them about this calendar, they brought me to their place and started sharing how they brought the swans back. They treated me with human decency. I see now that my purpose, has been found, even though I was pushed into poverty. So many people left my life, and the Patreons were, where I was continuing to be intimate, to share my life, where I ended up just being offline for a while, and then having to move again, and then being in an even more abusive place, and there was no internet, so I was offline again, but I stayed connected to my small little group of patrons. I call them my patron saints. And I just finally found a safe place. So that's why I was fighting for the swans the year before to have a safe place, because I haven't lived in safe places most of my life. So my story is about complex trauma, which is multiple stress over and over and over. So like PTSD could just be like a one-time deal. The complex is PTSD, like over and over and over. And that's what the little ugly duckling had. So I moved in November to a safe place. And got this calendar finished, and I'm so grateful I did, because Mama Swan hit a power line and died December 4th. So I had to go in and do a second edition of the calendar, and at the end I do have a thank you to the patrons, but I also put a RIP 2004 to 2019. And I also started a Trumpeter Swans in Ontario YouTube channel, and of course the community and Patreon. So even though it hasn't been a big community, I've been able to save up for a professional camera, because on the first calendar it was all photos from my phone, and most of this calendar is photos from my phone. I did get a few photos with the professional camera. I'm so grateful. So grateful that I'm still here to tell this story, because the swans really were my lifeline last year. I was in therapy and looking at all the abuse through my life, and my doctor had said it's going to be a really tough journey, and here's some antidepressants. Well, those antidepressants made me suicidal. So last December, I was inches from taking my life. I took myself off the antidepressants, and while I was in the darkest night of the soul ever, here's Mr. Soul, and he had told me, because I was writing a book last year, The Miracle of Healing with the Swans, and I told him I was writing a book, and he said he had some writings for me. And I thought maybe they're just poems or what have you. Well, they were all handwritten, and he ended up learning a new skill, going on computer and typing out 40 pages for me. So when I said goodbye to them in April, because they were moving, he handed me these pages, and so I put them in an ebook at the moment, Return of the Wild, and it's the adventures of Mr. and Mrs. Soul and the Trumpeter Swans for 25 years. So the journey now is going to be a lot stronger. The book will get written, and I just have so much gratitude for the intimate circle, the patrons that stood by me, believed in me, cheered me on. It meant more than anything that's been created, just to know they had my back, especially when life got really, really difficult in 2019. So it's a beautiful community, and yeah, we definitely invite more to join us to support myself going forward and bringing forth the books about how special these birds are. And yeah, just full-hearted thank you. Thanks for listening.